Cal, can you believe it? I'm finally back home. Look, it's my mum's sideboard. I'm back.
I can see it. Amazing. Who would have thought? It always seems like a really long summer, but then all of a sudden it disappears on you and it's all over and you're back home.
I can't believe it. It's more than 2.5 months since I left home to do the end of the WBBL and go into quarantine. So you're still going. You've still got a couple more in Melbourne.
Yeah, I've got a couple of games at Junction with the women's Ashes, so still a couple to go, but it's been huge this summer. It's been a lot busier than I'd expected from the media standpoint, but it's been great fun and just an abundance of, amazing stories, amazing cricket, disappointments, euphoria. It's just had it all this summer.
The thing is, I personally believe that you owe it all to me, Cal, because I think Channel 7 have seen you on Timed Out and went, that guy's really good. We need to use him more. So
yeah, well, it can't have been on my performance. It had to have been something, someone just pushing the pedal in the background, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's okay. You can thank me. You can thank me later. But for now, let's get on with the show. Hello everyone and welcome to Time Out for Sporting News Australia with me, Melinda Farrell, and Callum Ferguson, here to discuss, it's a controversial week in some ways. There's been all sorts happening and it's still happening, and we still don't know what's happening, Cal, when it comes to Justin Langer. So look, they're either offering him something or not. The board's been meeting all day. We may know by the time you're watching this at home. But I guess what we really need to look at is how have we got to this point where it's all such a huge mess? Now, what's your opinion on whether they should stick with Justin Langer for another long-term or short-term contract or decide to part ways now?
Yeah, look, I think that's the pertinent question. How did we get to where we are now? Look, there was discussion back in August around, how was the relationship between the coach and the players? Was it settled? Was there some disgruntled players in the group? It all came to a head actually about a day or two after the coach was re-signed for another couple of years, I believe, Mel, and it was a really interesting little period there. Cricket Australia came out backing Justin Langer. Then 2 days later, I think it was, the players had a meeting with Cricket Australia effectively saying, we need big change from the coach. It's not working. We need to see Justin just rearrange and make a few changes to his game plan. Now, as far as I'm aware, he's made a lot of changes and he's changed his game plan from a coaching standpoint. His role in and amongst the team has definitely changed, and it's a lot less hands-on from what I understand. So, Justin had a lot asked of him. He's a legend of Australian cricket, obviously a very proud man and someone who's been enormously successful wherever he's gone as a coach. You cannot argue with that record that he has. So that's where I look back to that moment where Cricket Australia actually announced, and to be honest, it's something that I've seen a lot from Cricket Australia. They announce what they're doing and then go to the players after they've announced it and made the move. And it's just so backwards. Like, it just continually makes a mess for them. I think back to when they made the move to 14 games in Big Bash cricket. They didn't consult the players beforehand, although they came out in the media and said they consulted the players. They actually made that decision before they even got around and spoke to all of the players. So they actually make a lot of decisions before they go and ask some of the key stakeholders, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. And I firmly believe that that's led to the situation we're in now. If they had held their announcement or held their decision making around a re-signing of Justin back then, and then got the opinion from the players that it's not working and they can't see it working. Now, I'm not saying they couldn't see it working, but they certainly asked a lot of Justin, said he needed to change the way he went about it. So he's now made those changes, and they have been a force to be reckoned with ever since. Whilst the lead into the World Cup wasn't, as easy on the eye as what a lot of people, would have hoped, I believe, leading in. What they never put out in the park was their best team leading into that World Cup at any point. They finally get the team together. They've managed to get some players playing into positions that, they haven't necessarily filled before. They make success of that. They romp to a World Cup win on the back of Mitch Marsh and a couple of those guys that are examples of what I'm talking about. Marcus Stoinis, Matthew Wade finding themselves into the middle order. And they win the World Cup, then they come into a home Ashes and trounce England 4-0. And all of a sudden, Justin Langer looks like the hottest property in international cricket from a coaching standpoint, yet can't get a contract that he's happy with from his home board. So it is a very, very muddled situation at the moment that they found themselves in. And it feels like, to me, it's of their own doing. It all goes back to consulting the playing group post actually making the decision back in August, I think it was, Mel.
Yeah, they did. I think there's a bit of political naivety, and there's been a vacuum there. A lot of people left Cricket Australia, including the people who were in charge of comms and PR, all of that. And while it's more than a PR exercise, it's like, did they have anyone who could look at this situation as well, just even from how this looks perspective, let alone just the consultation of the players? Because by kicking the can down the road, I don't think they understood that you can't just do this in a vacuum. You can't just say, well, we'll look at this after the Ashes and then we'll tie it up in a nice neat bow and then we'll make an announcement and then everything's hunky-dory. That's just not how things work. And you do have vested interests who make use of the media to get information out there, and all the sides do it. Once you allow that to happen, I've watched the pro and anti sort of Langer opinions coming out through various outlets, and it sets it up as an adversarial thing, like one side versus the other, whether it's players versus Langer or Cricket Australia versus Langer. And I don't think that helps anyone. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. You're not just going to be able to kick the can down the road forever and then decide to pick it up at a convenient moment. It's just not how it works with things like contract negotiations. So a bit of political naivety there, I think, on their part.
Yeah, and look, when it comes to, coaches and what's the ideal period of time for a coach or a manager to be heading up a team, I've always felt like different coaches have different shelf lives. But I did take with good interest Darren Lehman's comments earlier in the summer in suggesting that, 4 years is a pretty good period of time. There's been great success. He looks back on his time and wishes he'd maybe called it a little bit earlier than he obviously did in the end. It is an interesting argument. I mean, now Justin has brought such it's an enormous amount of success really since the Cape Town disaster. It's been one of the great turnarounds really when you look at it on face value, and if you look at it a little bit deeper, it doesn't matter really how they've gone about it, from a relationship standpoint between the playing group. It actually sounds like it's been a pretty mature approach, getting the coach in, giving some feedback, and then Justin very maturely and taking his ego out of it, saying, yeah, you know what, I'm not perfect, I'm going to make some changes. Then they go and have an amazing run of 6 months where they've won a T20 World Cup into a 4-0 Ashes win on home soil, very nearly 5-0 whitewash. So you then look at that and go, well, do we now sign him on long-term, 3-4 years, or do we hold firm on 1 to 2, which now has proven not to be to the liking of the coach? Now we've got a bit of a mess. There was no game plan leading into this moment now, which is probably what makes it so messy. It just looks unorganised. It looks like they haven't had any foresight, and they haven't been in constant communication with the stakeholders that we're talking about, the playing group and the head coach himself, as to what are we going to be comfortable with. We'll just wait until the end of the Ashes to make that decision or start lines of communication. That's too late. That needs to be happening constantly as you go along. And I wonder whether it's a bit of a symptom of the constant revolving door at Cricket Australia on Jollymont Street, where we just don't seem to be able to hang on to our admin staff for long periods of time. It just seems like we've got people coming in and out constantly, and that can't lead to continuity and, a really stable foundation. It just seems to constantly be a bit rickety and a little bit unstable, which isn't a great position to be in, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, that goes back to the naivety that I was talking about as well. I just think it's a shame because the time to make the decision really was to sit down and work it out in August, work out if there was going to be an exit plan or an extension then. And if it was going to be an exit plan, they could have sent him out in a blaze of glory and said, well, all honours, end of the Ashes, celebrate, the Justin Langer era. But now, no matter what happens, no matter which way it goes, if he stays, I think this is going to hang around constantly. And if he goes, it's just going to leave a really nasty taste in everyone's mouth. I don't think Justin Langer deserves that.
No, I agree, especially after the last 6 months we've had. On the back of those performances, you deserve another round at it. And I can't really tell right now. I think it's probably leaning towards him exiting stage left, which is really unfortunate after the run that he's had. When you get those performances on the board, it's a win-loss industry, isn't it? It must be unfathomable from his point of view that he wouldn't be in the running for a long-term contract if he was in just about any other sport. With those results, it'd be a long-term contract of 3-4 years coming his way. But I also look at it, if you look over in America, I reckon if LeBron James didn't want he didn't want the manager that's currently in the position there, he didn't like working with him, he'd be gone pretty quickly. And, unfortunately, from Justin Langer's point of view, his captain had a chance to come out and put it to bed yesterday. And from his point of view, it didn't happen. And Pat Cummins, basically stepped aside and let it through to the keeper. That doesn't read well, and you'd have to suggest that, on the back of that, things aren't looking great for Justin at this stage.
Well, that's it, yes. Now, we have gone well over our timed out, but it's not surprising, really. We're taking over this. It has been such a massive story, so I'm giving us out. We're timed out, but we're making a stand on that one. Next topic, though, well, let's stick with coaches while we're there, because I start the timer again. England. Well, they always say Ashes kind of end careers often as players. This time around, Ashley Giles has gone from one of the top jobs, and Chris Silverwood, the head coach, is also out. Not really unexpected. I do note that Tom Harrison, the CEO at the moment, the ECB, so they don't have a director of cricket, a head coach, they don't have a chair, but they still have a CEO who's making the announcements and who is likely to get a share of quite a big bonus in a few months' time. What do you make of that? Do you think that was the right choice, or are they the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, look, it seems as though right now they're the low-hanging fruit. They are a team that's put their, I suppose, their records on the line a little bit by playing far more Test cricket than the majority over the last 18 months, 2 years. And we have to thank the English playing group and staff. We need to really thank them properly at some point, because they kept international cricket going. They just continued to front up series after series and put their best foot forward as long as they could. But in the end, it just looked like a really beaten up and fatiguing group that turned up on Australian shores. And I think that's, I don't think anyone's going to debate that. And they just weren't good enough in that state. And I do wonder, if you put those two lineups up against each other, both having played a similar amount of Test cricket over the last couple of years, I would have hoped it would have been a tighter series. But in the end, Australia just beat up on England, and it looked horrible at times. And I think to be honest. I think what's ended up doing Ashley Giles and Chris Silverwood in has been probably the lack of tactical nous and some of the decision making that was made in and around the team in the lead up to the first test and then throughout the series. You know, to tactically get your selection so far wrong. It was to the point where it was almost all we were talking about for periods of the Ashes, for weeks on end, and continued to refer back on throughout the series because it had such a detrimental impact on the side at the start of the series, which is the most important period. If they were able to, make a good fist of that first test, get their best attack out in the park to make the most of those conditions that were dished up, the whole series, the complexion could have been completely different, but they completely mucked it up. And then on the back of that, panicked and then mucked it up again in Adelaide by not playing a spinner and, probably not playing Mark Wood. I mean, fair dinkum. I mean, how badly did they get that wrong? I reckon as much as anything, poor performance, yes, but I think some of the decision-making had to have impacted that decision. And yes, whilst they might have been low-hanging fruit, I think they probably they contributed to having that position, really. I just feel like they didn't... There wasn't enough there for the hierarchy, I believe, to say, you know what, yeah, they got these things right, they got that right. They got very little right at any stage during that series. So I do feel like, they've ended up in the position they are in on the back of their own handiwork, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a thing that's going to happen. There are probably going to be more people to go as well, you imagine, and people are going to expect heads to roll. Chris Silverwood was probably a little bit out of his depth, perhaps in some ways, and Ashley Giles, well, is probably very occupied with just trying to keep cricket on the park. But when it comes down to it, they managed to keep cricket going. But it's the thing about the Ashes, isn't it? It doesn't matter what else goes right. When the Ashes goes wrong, then usually someone has to cop it. So two very, very nice guys, and it's sad to see anyone lose their job, but I can understand why it had to happen. All right. Okay, ripping through then. Let's get through to the main show, shall we? Because Australia women have retained the Ashes with a win in the first ODI, so they now can't be beaten. They could, England, if they win the next two ODIs, draw level in the series, and that would mean Australia retain it because they already hold it. But, gee, it was another, again, in a way, a big one, a game where, again, we've seen England get themselves into a really good position where they could have won it, but they didn't have the killer instinct to be able to get themselves over the line.
Yeah, that's right, Mel. Look, and I had the fortune of calling that game yesterday afternoon and into the evening, and England did a fantastic job to keep Australia to 205 on what was probably a slightly slower and maybe not quite as rock hard a pitch at Manica as what we're used to seeing. So the ball did hold a little bit. It was a touch slower, but they used those conditions beautifully, the English bowlers, and it all started at the top with Brun and Shrubsall, and they just put a lot of pressure on the top order of the Australians, and the Australians really couldn't get going. Beth Mooney, I mean, where would the Australian team be without her over the last couple of years? She's just been enormous. She's been a juggernaut with the bat in the hand for that team, and again dug them out of the hole and took them to a total which was defendable and proved to be a winning score quite remarkably. I think we all expected that batting lineup of the England side to make a better fist of that total and that chase, and unfortunately they couldn't get going either, and then they weren't able to weather the storm quite like Beth Mooney was able to. Beth was obviously involved in a few partnerships. Probably the one that really stood out towards the end was the McGrath-Mooney partnership. Again, Talia McGrath involved. While she didn't go on with it, it was a big partnership in the game that got them to a total, which they were able to defend in the end. And I just want to mention Darcy Brown. I mean, what a superstar she is. Young South Australian Scorpion. To watch her and Megan shoot, take the new ball and dominate like they did, it was no surprise to me as a South Australian cricket fan. But Darcy Brown, 18 years of age, just continues to go from strength to strength, and she's just showing such great maturity. And she along with Beth Mooney were the two for mine. They just put in between the two of them, two of the best performances of the series on the back of. If you look at Beth's innings, high pressure situation, the chance to retain the Ashes right here and now at Manuka. Well, Darcy Brown put the icing on top. She went out there and rolled through that top order of the English side, and it couldn't have been more impressive.
Yeah, how unusual to hear you bigging up the South Australians. You and Bharat Sundaresan. If you start tweeting #Mighty South Australia, I'm going to block you. I'm just putting that out there right now. Don't do it, Cal. Don't fall for it. The thing about two of those, right? Beth Mooney, I saw her at Manuka the day before that game. She was walking around Manuka looking for a thick shake. She's still on a mostly liquid diet, which is unbelievable. Yeah, she was able to have some soft pasta, I think, but she was still mostly on liquids. Unbelievable. And Darcy Brown, we spoke to her after the game, and it's hilarious because, she bowled like a demon, really. That nip backer that came back in after the outswing, the one that pinged even Heather Knight on the pads. Unbelievable. And you don't realise until you talk to her that she is only 18. And she's all like really shy and was going, oh yeah, I've just been in the ice bath. And yeah, no, just so sweet teenager. And it's incredible. So I just think England are missing that killer instinct, and Heather Knight even admitted that and said we've got to find that killer instinct. I've written a piece. If you go and check Sporting News, you'll see that I basically have said that Meg Lanning's Australia is like cricket's the Terminator, where no matter you can fire all your ammunition at them, and England did with their bowling, but they just remorph and they come back and they don't stop and they're relentless. And England, that they are Meg Lanning's Australia's Sarah Connor. They are, that's it. They are Sarah Connor, and they ain't going to hold off. So, yes. So England have to find a way to make the machine come down, or whatever it is on that Terminator, because there's a lot of talent in that England.
They need to turn it around. There's a World Cup. There's an ODI World Cup coming up, so they need to turn it around. Australia have got a real chance to put a dent in England's chances by just beating up on them now, and you really do hope that they're going to be able to find something, and they may make some changes, both sides, with the last two games, but they can't afford to roll over here because it could do some serious damage mentally to them. There could be some demons coming out of it if they roll over and end up losing these next two.
Absolutely agree. It's the demons that are there. All right. So final topic for today, and I'm starting it again. We're going over on a few of these, but we call the shots. So yeah, our final topic today. We're sticking to the women's game. It was interesting to see during the match, the news come out, quotes from Sourav Ganguly, the BCCI saying, being asked about the women's IPL, which is asked about regularly, and he said there's not going to be one again this year. So that is another can kicked down the road. They are going to have a challenge. I was interested that he said that there would definitely be a women's IPL at some stage once the number of female players went up. I don't know what does it go up? Where does it come from? I believe the official term is gazillions of women in India playing cricket. There are a lot of women there. When are they going to have faith that there is enough talent and depth there with the international players to put on a really good tournament? It's disappointing.
Yeah, it is disappointing. And look, it's an interesting line to take on it from Sourav. Look, I've spent a bit of time with him at the Pune Warriors. He came on board as a mentor and then ended up playing some cricket with us. And he's an interesting guy to talk to about the sport. He thinks deeply about the game, and he has some really good ideas. I'm interested, that comment about needing more players. I'm assuming he's talking about more players that are of standard that they're happy with. Looking back to when I was playing in the IPL, we had 10 overseas players on the list and we were playing 4. So, look, I wonder whether, if he's not, and the BCCI as a whole aren't comfortable with the number of high-quality players, I think there's enough talent around the world. So why don't they up the number of overseas players, which I think would be great anyway, because we'd get to see so many players from around the world taking on each other, playing against teammates. That's one of the great things about the IPL. I just feel like there's enough talent out there for it to be an amazing spectacle and for it to be a fantastic standard. If they're worried about that, just up the number of overseas players. Just make it 5 overseas players, and then you need one less local. And that's a pretty straight up and down solution. I don't know if I agree that there's not enough play. They do have a lot of people over there, but I think there's a way around it if you really wanted it. It doesn't seem like they really wanted it at this point, which is a little bit disappointing, it has to be said. And it looks, they're going to have another one of these challenges, I believe. So, look, that'll be great to watch. But I think the sooner there's an IPL, women's IPL, the better. And I think it's just so exciting to see it talked about and see how far the women's game's come in the last 5-6 years. Because watching the standard of the WBBL over the last couple of years, you're watching it. If you compared the first half of this season to the second half of the season, you see a drastic improvement even within one tournament, let alone over years. So, look, I'm really excited about where women's cricket's heading. It's just it would have been nice not to see that little road hump and just to see an IPL unleashed this year, but unfortunately it's not going to happen.
Well, two comments I would just add to that. One, when they started the WBBL in Australia, I can tell you Cricket Australia were very nervous about the depth and that the standard wouldn't be high enough. And that's one of the reasons that there were only, I think it was 8 games originally scheduled to be on TV, because they were nervous. And then Channel 10 ended up putting on 2 more games in that season anyway, because actually it rated so much better than they were expecting, and the standard was already really good. The same thing happened in England when they started the KSL. They didn't want too many games broadcast. They were really nervous about the depth of talent there from the local players again. So this happens every time that they set up a women's league. Always really nervous, and each time the players lift, they improve really quickly, and it's entertaining. I mean, even watching that, I find really interesting watching the internationals. The number of guys who say to me they love watching the women bowl because of the amount of swing and seam that they get is so fun to watch. And also the techniques of the batters. There's so much that's enjoyable to watch about that. So, that's one thing. The other interesting thing is Ramiz Raja, the PCB, has said that he wants to have the first, basically, sort of women's T20 full league in the subcontinent. Now that will set a cat among the pigeons and be quite interesting if the PSL ends up starting a women's PSL before the BCCI sets up a women's IPL. Maybe that'll be the kick.
Yeah, that's right. It's Russia and the US racing to get to Mars, isn't it? It's fantastic, because what that'll do is it'll just speed up the process, won't it? We'll see an IPL sooner. Hopefully, now that Ramiz has come out and said that, we're going to see a PSL sooner. They're going to be fighting tooth and nail over that space, and it's great. That's fantastic. That's what we want to see. Hopefully, it brings us to the point where we've got both of those competitions up and running sooner than later, because I think everyone's craving it.
Yeah, I do too. Cal, that was a lot. There's a lot going on, man. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. As always, always interesting to listen to. And good luck with the commentary on the last two games. I'm going to be covering them from my couch.
That sounds like a very nice way to go about it. I'll be in the studio, but I'll be thinking of you sitting on the couch with a cup of tea and a scone and doing it the easy way.
Glass of wine, but other than that, you've got it spot on. Thanks, Cal. Thanks to all of you for watching this week. Do make sure you give us a like and drop by with any comments. Contact us on Twitter, and we will look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, whatever you're watching, please enjoy your cricket.
Thanks, guys.